Major Langston was a 60-year-old man who owned the land next to the property owned by my Aunt Esther. The Davis men would legally hunt in the vast Apalachicola National Forest behind both properties. There had been tension building between the Davises and Major Langston for some time. Left to die, the shooting. According to my father, to hunt squirrels you must go where they live. They gathered nuts for food among the hickory oak and sweet gum in the swamps behind Aunt Esther's and Major Langston's property. These pristine wetlands were teeming with not only eastern gray squirrels, but all sorts of wildlife, including raccoons, possum families, shiny black moccasins, and hungry wild hogs. A bunch of fat squirrels was good eating when skinned, cleaned, dredged, fried, and served with rice in rich pan gravy. This easily accessible protein was a staple for many families in Wakulla County for generations. It was also a tradition for Wakulla men to hunt them. However, by the mid-1960s, many Wakulla residents had gone to Tallahassee to find work, and hunting had become merely recreational. There were reasons beyond finding meat that drew these boys to the woods this day. They liked to hunt for the pleasure of it. After a stressful week on the job, tromping in the woods and swamps was a salve to a man's spirit. The air had a distinct odor of sulfur caused by putrefying vegetation. On the forest floor was a carpet of colorful fallen leaves juxtaposed against low-growing evergreen palmetto. Under all this raw beauty lie a scraggly, Above all of this raw beauty lie a scraggly canopy of bare trees that dangled with shreds of waving Spanish moss, reminding one of forgotten laundry left to disintegrate on a clothesline. For the boys, this familiar place was restorative, like no other medicine. The boys liked to hunt for the camaraderie of it. These two had a shared history of family, place, and time, along with a trove of boyhood memories, pranks, and raunchiness. There was a time Dexter gave his Davis cousins a golden shower near their favorite swimming hole on the Sopchoppy River. Perched high on a tree limb over the path to the water, he laid in wait for his targets to head down for a swim. When they were perfectly aligned under his position, he released his bladder of warm yellow pee. It rained directly on the heads of his marks, to his great hilarity and to their great disgust. The boys also liked to hunt for the challenge of it. As with the ancient hunters before them, the two men competed against each other. In Wakulla, shooting skill was a measure of manliness. Boys would get a BB gun when they were just big enough to pick one up. Then somewhere along 8 or 9, they received their first .22 rifle. They would practice shooting tin cans, small prey, or other easy, entertaining targets. Teenagers and grown men mostly used 12-gauge shotguns to hunt, so receiving one was a proud moment and a significant rite of passage. My father told me many times about the most disappointing Christmas he experienced as a boy. Around the age of 12, feeling his time had come, he asked for a shotgun from his father. On Christmas morning, when he unwrapped his gift to find a toy bow and arrow set instead, he was crushed and remembers this incident and talks about it even to this day. This day in January, the boys were both carrying 12-gauge shotguns loaded with number 8 shot, or what they called small shot. It keeps a small animal's flesh intact during impact. The unusually mild afternoon temperatures made it even more comfortable to be in the swamp shooting and bagging kill. They had parted ways to cover more ground, stopping occasionally to rest on a fallen tree or to take a leak. Over the course of the afternoon, they dropped 6 fat grays. This was enough for Sunday dinner. Now it was getting late, and the temperatures were dropping. Aunt Esther would expect them back soon. They had a choice to make. They could slog through the swamp of the national forest or take a shortcut. There was an unused logging road once traveled by St. Joe Paper Company trucks hauling cut pines out of the forest. This was a 2-rut easement of hard-packed sand with easy access to the Smith Creek Highway. From there, the boys could walk along the road easily back to Aunt Esther's house. The catch? This route took them across Major Langston's property. The boys had heard of previous run-ins and had been warned about Major's hostility. He had once harassed Terry's older brother Larry and threatened to kill Terry's father because he didn't want them poaching his game or trespassing on his property. At the time, it was common for hunters in these woods to follow game wherever it led them in pursuit, without concern for property lines. The boys rationalized that he was just full of bluster and hot air and posed no real threat. The logging road would get them back to Aunt Esther's warm fire and supper table. They found the road and set off towards the highway with the sack of squirrels tied to Dexter's belt. The shotguns were leaning against their shoulders, barrels in the air, safeties on, and loaded in case of an opportunity to take a shot at something. So they were carrying the rifles kind of like this, right? As they walked out of the swamp, perhaps they were talking about asshole supervisors at work, fixing truck transmissions, family gossip, or getting laid. Maybe they were walking in contemplative silence, as men sometimes do. What they didn't know was that Major had been on his land all afternoon and had heard them shooting. Major's 320 beautiful acres were the only thing of material value that mattered to him. According to his accounts, he often spent time on his property and former home, making the hour drive from Tallahassee where he lived. Perhaps it was to reconnect to his place of belonging. Maybe he needed to tinker with something broken or wanted to fill his lungs with the fresh air of his ancestors. He could have needed a break from the demands and criticisms of his wife, Margaret, who was incessantly annoyed with him. On afternoons like this, it was his ritual to have a few swallows of whiskey from the bottle he kept hidden on the side of the old house. He needed to be on this land. This was where he felt like a man, powerful, connected, and successful. It was on this property that stood his greatest lifetime achievement, a 2-story home he built in the 1930s for his mother. It was a modest, rustic, and unpainted yet impressive structure. He planned and built every stick of it with grit, sweat, and pioneer ingenuity. He had listened to the exploding of shotguns from the swamp, each blast dialing up the temperature on the rage brewing in his gut. Fueled by the effects of alcohol, his anger boiled. Not only did he resent what he believed was the Davis boys' careless sense of entitlement as they stomped over his property, taking his game without a lick of thought or caring for what was his. He also blamed them for leaving their garbage on his unspoiled property. He was sick and damn tired of it. The boys, walking easily along the road, thought they heard the cracking of twigs, then clearly heard the rustle of clothing. Major stepped out of the brush with his .22 rifle tight to his shoulder, his eyes staring down the sight. He walked closely towards them. He was a few feet away when he told them to get the hell off my property and stay off. Then he demanded Dexter drop the bag of his squirrels. Not taking Major seriously, Dexter snapped back with smart-ass bravado. If you want them, you gotta take them from me. Then, in a gesture of foolish defiance, Dexter twitched his shoulder, the one that supported the shotgun barrel, as if he were to drop it into position for firing. Major felt an explosion of rage. He points the gun right into the mouth that just pissed him off. Then, almost without realizing it, he pulls the trigger. The gun exploded, the round hitting Dexter in the left jaw. Then, with an immediate pivot of the barrel, he aims the gun at Terry's neck. Boom! Boom! 2 shots at close range in rapid succession, both hitting the intended targets. The ground shook as the boys' bodies hit the ground like freshly felled trees in the woods. Major felt a fleeting moment of satisfaction from the rage. This relief then reformed into profound despair as he saw the boys grotesquely splayed out on the ground, gurgling and bleeding. He agonized to himself, "Oh, Lordy, what in the hell have I just done?"